Welcome to Friday's devotions. We are looking at this fascinating book of Exodus, and today we come to probably the most famous part in the book of Exodus, Exodus chapter 20, and the giving of the Ten Commandments. Let's just read this familiar passage. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you to the land of Egypt out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not take for yourselves a carved image, or any likeness of anything that's in heaven above, or is in the earth beneath, or that's in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visit the iniquity of the fathers and the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to the thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labour and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant, or your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth and sea and all that's in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honour your father and your mother, that the days may belong in the land that your Lord your God has given you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbour. You shall not covet your neighbour's house. You shall not covet your neighbour's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbour's. Now when all the people saw the thunder and the flashes of lightning and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, the people were afraid and trembled, and they stood far off. Amen. The Ten Commandments were given by God at Mount Sinai immediately after the children of Israel had left Egypt. And these commandments highlight where true freedom is found by submitting to God's will, by submitting to God's commands. It's important just to think about these commandments very quickly. You shall have no other God before me. God is to be first. He's have no competitors for our ultimate affection and devotion. You shall not make any graven image. It means we shouldn't worship idols. We should worship the Lord as he is and not bring him down to be less than he is. It's interesting, it's the longest commandment, and if you read through the history of the Old Testament, that's a sin that the Lord despised more and more. You think of the story of Solomon, who had hundreds of wives, went clearly against God's commandments and God's purpose for marriage. And yet the thing that the Lord really despised was his idolatry, which is spiritual adultery, making the Lord out less than he is. We need to worship the Lord in the truth. You should not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. We need to use God's name very carefully. And sadly, the Lord's name is regularly used as a swear word. But for Christians, how we maybe are most guilty of breaking this commandment is when we sing. Do we think about the words? Do we mean the words that we sing when we sing? You know, it's important, if your church does it, that you have an idea what you're singing and take time to read the words and then really work hard at really meaning what you sing. It's the same with praying. Just don't say words. Really think about it. The fourth one, keeping the Sabbath day holy. Oh, how many Christians today fail in that? How many Christians are the Sabbath, they have their hour of worship and that doesn't. It's one of the reasons why I love the evening service and always want to encourage our people the evening services, because morning and evening service is one of the best ways of keeping the Sabbath day holy. Just as I was thinking this morning about this, was that I just hear on the radio that the betting shops and bingo halls are now open on the Sabbath. Oh, and you know, the sad thing is, I think Christian politicians are afraid to speak up and say, listen, this is against God's law. And they're afraid to say that. They have to try and find some other argument. Keep the Sabbath day holy. The Lord has promised if we call his Sabbath a delight, he will really bless his people. Honour your father and your mother. Respect them. For children to obey them, but for those who are adults to continue to honour their parents as long as they live, and even beyond that, honouring their name. You shall not murder. Remember, Jesus says, murder isn't just the action, but what you do in your heart and hatred towards people. You shall not commit adultery. Again, it's not just a physical act, it's what you do in your mind and your heart. Particularly men, keep your minds pure. You shall not steal. Include your taxes. Includes being honest about that. You shall not bear false witness about your neighbour. You shouldn't exaggerate things. You shouldn't twist things to make those around you seem worse. And finally, you shall not covet. In the words of Paul, who learned to be content in every situation he had. We should be content with the lot the Lord has given to us. We shouldn't be always unhappy because we see someone else who's advancing beyond us. At the end of this, we see that there was thunder and flashes of lightning and smoke coming from the mountain and a trumpet blast. The people are terrified. It's reminding that these commandments are not coming from a little grandfather who will wink if we try to break them and say it's not important. This is a holy God. This God's a consuming fire. This is a God of wrath and judgment. And remember, the commandments are to guide us how to live, but also the commandments, the law of God, is a tutor to point us to Jesus. They're a mirror that show us that we don't reach God's standard. And we need to flee to Christ for forgiveness and trusting in his shed blood to wash us. And then in his grace, seek to live and obey them, not to earn salvation, but to obey them in thanksgiving for all he's done for us, knowing that real blessing in life comes from walking in his ways. Do you believe that? Do you believe that Jesus, who died on the cross, who has given you his commandments, wants you to have best? And you'll find it walking in his ways. May God give us that grace. Amen.